There we go.
I believe in you. If we can do this, the country can do anything.
You didn't see me touch it.
If the women in your life can
I,
do this,
I five sisters. Of course, that's the way it
we can
goes.
do anything,
All
Charlie.
daughters.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm, how are you?
I'm pretty good today.
Oh, Paul Becker's here.
Yes, Paul Becker's a client of mine.
Hey, Paul, we're gonna get in it. Um, okay, so for those of you who don't know what a fangirl I am of Charlie Hawk. Charlie, can you scooch any closer to the phone so people can see your handsome face?
There. How's that?
Okay.
I'll lean in.
Yeah, lean in, Cheryl. So Charlie plays a very important role in my life. He is a communications coach, which I came out talking a lot and thinking I knew what to say all of the time. And it turns out I don't. It turns out I'm not always very good at that. Charlie, no comment from you on this part.
I,
And Charlie is a friend of my family's, and he has helped a number of us through some difficult binds because it turns out most of the challenges in the world are communications issues. And we all find ourselves in having different definitions for things, making the wrong assumptions, not making sure everyone's being as transparent with objectives as we could. So Charlie may have helped me break up with people in the past, and I have that script which I have copy and pasted and sent to plenty of girls.
yes.
This is how you break up with a dude over the phone. So anyway, so Charlie's coached me through that and some other business related challenges.
That makes me sound like I help people be cheap. So here's how you
Oh,
break up over the phone. That's a
Charlie,
wonderful
it's
claim to.
literally the greatest gift you've given me, and I have passed it forward. So
Okay.
anyway, breaking up with boyfriends and people that aren't necessarily right for you. But I also dragged Charlie into chapter 8 of Raising Our Hands because as I was starting to write, I was very much trying to figure out what the turnkey solutions or strategies that we might be able to give folks as they head into the complexities of our lives and the social dynamics that feel contradicting to each other. And, you know, I was just writing before we got on about the turmoil and the tension in my family. And most of it's been over the past couple of years, and most of it's been because Jenna, this family member, has been pissed. And so I was really eager to sort of offer women some turnkey solutions on how to engage in courageous conversations. And so Charlie and I spent a number of hours trying to figure out exactly what some of like the low-hanging fruit is, recognizing that it's all case by case, it's all unique, there's lots of different variables and nuances, and I'm not offering the complexity as an excuse for you to go sit in the back corner and return to your Netflix series. But I'm just recognizing that there's variables that we can't necessarily speak to. But Charlie, I wanted to specifically bring you in now because we are 46 days, 48 days, 5 minutes away from what I decided today was the most important election in the nation's history.
I think you and a lot of other people, I don't care which side of the conversation you sit on, I think a lot of people have come to the conclusion this might be the most important election, at least in their lifetimes, if not in the lifetime of our country.
And I think people say things like, oh, this is the most, like, I remember hearing that with Obama, and then again, you know, definitively in 2016. But I actually think that there's going to be such a shift in the structure of the country, and then and because whether we like it or not, the role that the country plays globally in like just the global community, that I think this could impact the nation more than anything else in our nation's history.
Uh, I don't, if you made a list of the most important issues in, well, since 2000, just so we shorten the time frame considerably, if you just make a list of the most important issues that have been either blue or red in this country, I think this election will at some way touch every single one of those issues, every single one of them. And it's the ones that really matter are the ones that really matter, whether you're this perspective or the other perspective. I don't think any of these issues are throwaway issues. I don't think they're extras on the menu. I think everything is an entree in this election.
Yeah, and I think this idea of like, so one of the things that I've been wrestling with is, how do there's ways to have courageous conversations about how one is feeling in a professional space or the direction a business is headed. And that's, I know, where you have a black belt. But, just talking from like friend to friend, human, American to American, here we are walking into an election where every issue, as you say, matters. And I don't have much patience for single issue voters right now. I think it's a nice cop out to like, I don't want to pay attention to the complexity of it. And like, I don't want to pay attention to it either. It's all overwhelming and I don't get most of it anyway, outside of it all feeling incredibly urgent. But how would we engage in conversations with family and friends who we have outstanding relationships with outside of political dialogue? Like, how does one navigate that today?
So at the core of a conversation around the topics that you've focused your book on and that seem to be the headlines of today, with every emotionally charged conversation, the single biggest issue to manage is your ego. When your ego decides that first and foremost, you have to win against everyone, no matter what the cost, which really, whether we understand it or not or want to accept it, your ego's job is to make you number one. And when you're number one, it means the other side has only options of number two or lower. So there's a real challenge to deal with these types of circumstances in a non-egotistical way. And the problem with this election is there are very few people that are really middle of the road. This is as polarized an environment as we could all be in. Everybody seems to be at an extreme. Yeah. So if your ego decides you have to win, you're telling someone that's your polar opposite that they have to get off their polar. They've got to get to your side of the equation or your end of the globe. And that's a really tough place to be with people that you may know well, you care about, you're related to, you have to live with, you have to have encounters with at the school meetings, you have to have encounters in the neighborhood, you have to have encounters in your workplace. And I can see some of the list of the people that are on here. There's clients of mine on here. They have to manage those conversations sometimes with the most important client relationships they have in their lives.
Right.
So if your ego gets a hold of you and gets in control of you, all bets are off.
And is it fair to say that because we live in a capitalistic society, a patriarchal society says there are two positions. You are either dominating or you are being dominated, and that there's no middle space to exist in. And middle space, like that middle territory, purgatory, is not something that I know. I haven't been raised, culturally raised in a society that's helped me or encouraged me to get there. And so I've been seeing a lot of chatter and sort of like off the record discussion with people in the political space who are saying that folks aren't reporting where they fall on the political side of things. Like polls aren't accurate now because people aren't reporting.
Right.
And my hypothesis is that it's because there's actually no swing voters right now. Is that people are like, I'm not playing this game. I'm not engaging in the polls. I'm just focused on like getting my new flags up, very literally. Like I've seen
Right.
a home where like every 4 days there's a new flag that's just like, to me it feels like it's a very much like, F you, this is my polar position. But this idea of like, we as a country have never said sit in the middle.
So I think it was Goethe, the German philosopher, who said, the hottest place in hell is reserved for the person who will make no choice in a moral crisis. And that statement alone says and challenges everyone, pick a side.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, playing it safe is not playing it safe. It's the peril of getting nothing or not standing for anything. And I think your characterization as there are no swing voters. I think that's a really accurate place. But I think there are some, and that's really what the battle's about. Whether you're for him or against him, when somebody says, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't cost me any votes. That's the epitome of saying there's no swing voters. Everybody's either with me or they're
Right.
not. And,
Right.
and that one statement 6 years ago epitomized exactly what you're talking about. And I think people on both sides of it either reacted to it and went, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, or they went, hell yeah, I'll vote for him no matter what he does.
Well, but the left is doing that too, right? If you go back to, and I'm not that well versed, so don't ask me any more clarifying questions. I'm only providing what I know on this. But in 1860s Spain, there was a huge division, and society was becoming more polarized. And the left, the equivalent of our left today, was debating over nuances and words and strategies and who was and who wasn't, da 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 da. And some scholars suggest that the left was so busy fighting with itself that it made room for the right to sweep in, put a dictator in position, Franco, and he was there for decades. And guess what country hasn't recovered from that in 1860? Spain.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like, you're either with us or you're not is rhetoric from both sides. And this is for all of those that are Charlie's friends and Charlie's clients. I'm very left. I'm very concerned. I'm very obviously not on the Trump team. And I'm very frustrated with progressive liberals because I think we've done two things. We've done 10,000 wrong things, but I think we've done two particularly problematic things right now. One, we've made everybody feel like an idiot who doesn't necessarily agree with us. And people, humans in general, I find, are constantly questioning their intellect, right? A patriarchal capitalistic society says that like, unless you have the billions of dollars and unless you're running the huge company, unless you're dominating with all these people underneath you that have to report to you, then you haven't really succeeded. Right. So like, oh shit, what was my point? Anyway, patriarchy, that you're
so nuanced, so stuck on that side of the conversation.
So that there's like very clear rules that you're stuck in the binary, like you're either with us or you're not. It's black, white, Republican, Democrat, you either won, lost. And then in addition to that, I think we've made people feel really stupid. Oh, this was the other thing that I think we made people feel really stupid because the systems that we believe are based in meritocracy, right? Like if you get the A's in math and then you get the scholarship and then you go to the smartest school and then you get the greatest degree, like that is somehow an earned intellect. And so we have very rigid ways of defining what intellect is. And so when I, guilty as charged, sit on my Instagram and fire hose it with like, what's the matter with you? How come you can't see this? And then other people who might just be coming out of work and like kind of want to check out some wedding dresses are like seeing me being like, bah! And I'm not pardoning they're not paying attention. And I'm not, because the facts are horrific and we have to hold space for those. But I've done a really good job of making people feel stupid. And then in addition to that, there's
Well,
this whole, go ahead.
so define a really good job of making people feel stupid.
How can you not see this?
Yeah, that doesn't make them feel stupid is my premise. It
Oh,
makes
go.
them more committed to the smartness of their position. So if you tell me if you try to make me feel stupid about it without logic, and this is really the key to this whole topic, they'll believe what makes them feel right, even if it's not factual. And so this is what this whole thing is pivoting on. Human beings are not data-driven or fact-driven creatures. We operate emotionally, and then we go find the facts to justify our emotions. And whether you're on the Trump train or not, I don't know that we have ever seen a person of public importance that has mastered the fact that you sell emotion and you make up the facts to make the emotion justifiable. So in a really crazy way, Trump knows something that most of the people on the left don't want to deal with. Fear and anger are the most motivating emotions for human beings. And his messaging has been fear and anger. And then he sprinkles in enough data points. You can decide if you think they're true or not. I'm letting anybody make that validation on their own. But they're fueled by, I'm afraid of, I'm worried about, I'm angry about what happened 5 years ago when I got laid off. And then you like, oh, well, then we're going to open a new automobile plant. I'll get my job back and I won't be angry anymore. Mm-hmm. He's a master of it. There's no two ways about it. No one's been as good at it. No one. And the liberal left doesn't want to trade in that currency. And so they don't want to start the like, well, we can create more fear than you can create.
You don't think the liberal left doesn't want to trade in that currency? For those of you who are watching, it is whenever I'm on the phone with Charlie, I have to have like a computer screen, because I'm like writing everything. It's so smart. But don't you think that the liberal left traded in that currency with Obama in 08? The yes, I can, the hope, the audacity of change, the audacity of hope. I forget what it was.
Was it positive emotion or negative emotion?
Well, it was definitely fear-based, right? It was like coming from a place of like, we have to make it better. We can get that hope back.
Yeah, that's positive. That's positive to me. That's like, we can grow. There's opportunity. There's forward. Trump is saying they're going to steal it from you.
I know. And
two different psyches. And that's, it's really tough. It's, look, my real job is a sales trainer, a business development specialist. And data doesn't sell products. Emotional connection. One of the greatest marketing campaigns of all time was the Michelin, there's a lot riding on your tires. They didn't even there was no voiceover. It was just a baby on a snow tire riding comfortably through the snow-covered hills. Right. Very, very powerful message. And so this goes back to our critical communication, critical conversations topic. And boy, we can get sucked into this other stuff. If you want to argue with data, people will just, because they don't want to lose, because they don't want to feel stupid, the more you want to argue with data, man, you better be ready for a long argument. And you better be ready at some point, not to insinuate that somebody's stupid. You better be just about prepared to blow up a relationship by saying, I've got to unfriend you, like from my life, not just from Facebook, because I think you're a moron.
Right.
Boy, that's a big price to pay for a lot of us with the people that we know and care about and love in our families that don't see the world the same way we do. And so in my opinion, the best way to argue isn't with big fat periods and boldly created exclamation points. It's with question marks. And so that's when we realize that everyone appears smarter, and we're not trained in this. And this kind of goes back to our patriarchal society. Never ask for help, never show a sign of weakness. Some of the best conversationalists in the world, all they ever did was ask another person questions.
Yeah.
So you hear something that you might not agree with, and instead of saying, well, I think that's the dumbest thing in the world,
right,
there's another option to say, well, help me understand why you got there. Help me understand why that's so important to you, instead of, I can't believe you absolutely agree with that. And so if my conversational model is to argue with you, well, that's my ego engaging. Well, what's your ego going to do when my ego engages?
Right, it's going to try to flare up. Yeah.
Whoa, let's pound the hell out of each other till we can't stand it any longer, till we're exhausted, or we make up an excuse to go pick up the kids at soccer.
Right.
And
those
so
cognitive acrobatics.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I try to reinforce with everyone, the best way to win an argument is to lose it right out of the gate.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So one of the things that let me just say this first. So in the book, rule number 1. Yeah. Literally, rule number 1. This is the galley. This is the book for Charlie's team here. That's the book. This is my very bruised up galley. Okay, rule number 1. Ask questions. This is the number 1 rule in this chapter, and arguably for your life moving forward. People are more interested in the questions you ask than the statements you make. Statements are all about you, but questions focus conversations on them. They'll not only deepen your understanding, they'll connect you to others too. As Jimi Hendrix says, knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens.
Yeah, that's it. That's if people, your best way to get someone to change their mind is for them to hear their own voice say something
that they don't agree with.
Yes. But if we tell somebody you have to disagree with what you're thinking, they're not going to do it. And so, look, we can expand the context of the conversation. If you're in a crisis in a relationship, which these conversations about this election are creating enormous crises in relationships. And if you're in a crisis in a relationship, go right to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And seeking first to understand requires you to ask someone, explain to me the grounding for your idea, your thought, your belief, because maybe I just don't know it as well as you do. That's very nurturing to the other side. It's not adversarial, it's nurturing. Help me understand. Someone else goes, well, I feel pretty good about myself because I might be smarter than my adversary right now. And once we've already lost, I could be wrong. Maybe my point of view is incorrect. Now we're not on opposite sides, we're side by side. Let's look at this together. I just don't think there's more than a handful of people.
I've never seen it. I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
I don't think I've never seen anyone transition out of a position that they had. Okay.
Well, I was thinking more about this,
Oh.
or opposites of this election. I've seen, look, people think sales is something other than just highly effective communication. That's all sales is. I'm a sales trainer. Yes. I'm a communication strategist. Same thing.
Right.
And that's, I don't want your product and I won't pay that price. Well, help me understand.
Right. So Charlie, before I quoted the book, you said that you have to lose a conversation, argument, debate first. And I want to understand a little bit about that because I've had a lot of pushback with this. And this is like, I'm a student of Charlie's. And so I can handle the blowback, but I do think it's a confusion that people have, right? Like, what do you mean lose? Again, going back to sort of the patriarchal capitalistic structure of either like you won or you're lost. But this idea of like, I say, question number one, rule number one, ask questions. Rule number two, always stay in the curious crouch. Number three, there are no easy answers, which I think is that ambiguity, which I feel like is in contradiction to what you said about the hottest place in hell is reserved for people who don't make moral decisions. But I think as we're trying to explore who we are and what our identity is, like that's not going to be an easy answer. Although I do think so much of this election is like a very clear moral choice. Rule number four, which is this idea of being willing to relearn. Like being willing to relearn, you might have a position on Arab-Israeli crisis. You might have a position on pro-choice. You might have a position on climate change. You might have a position on like pink coffee mugs. And you can have that position. And then you can be willing to understand a different one. But the fifth one, which is the one that people, I think, struggle the most with, is this idea of choosing vulnerability. And some women have said, there's too great of jeopardy. Like I'm in too much jeopardy if I ask for help. There is too much misogynistic positioning if I say to a man, can you help me understand your position? And it feels too dangerous for them.
Yeah, I don't doubt your findings in that experience at all. And this is why, look, I'll go back to my initial statement. The biggest challenge in this is this three-letter word, ego. Releasing your ego is, by the nature of what it is, it's putting yourself at risk. It's not having to win. And so when you have the courage to say, look, I could be wrong. Maybe I just haven't seen the same information that you have. Maybe my sources aren't as valid as yours aren't as validated, aren't as neutral. And so it's not throwing yourself on the floor in a submissive back down, paws up play. That's not the move at all. It's just removing yourself as a threat. And so to me, it's like, it's just saying, this is a difficult conversation. We're both very passionate. Maybe I've misunderstood some things. You obviously have paid more attention to your candidate's position and things like that. Maybe I do need to be more open to this. So that's releasing yourself from, I am correct. You have to pay attention to mine. And so that's allowing yourself to be threatened with, well, yes, you do need to pay attention. It's just, when you become less of a threat, it's easier for you to get accepted as part of the conversation, not the other side.
And it's easier for them to stand down too. Like it's almost like I kept saying, like, put vulnerability in the middle of the table like a fruit basket, like ask for help, say that you're confused, suggest that you're afraid too, et cetera, et cetera. But it's this idea, it's almost like pushing it further, which is like, I'm handing over my ego.
Yes.
And so you can give yours up too.
So look, I don't know how many people are plugged in here today, but however many they are, thank you for allowing us to.
There's a lot of people watching live, and then thousands of people are going to watch it because I'm going to save it.
So the real, well, I just.
Sorry, with that intimidating number. Anyway, we're talking about flowers.
You turn it over.
The flowers. Oh shoot.
Well, I think.
Handing over the ego.
Yeah. So what happens, you actually, oh, I know it. So there's a neurochemical process. When you're a 7-year-old, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, and you're in the grocery store, and I used to say the old person in their 60s until I became the old person in the 60s. The old person in the grocery store drops something. And you're like, oh, I get to go help this person who's struggled. We're kind and we help. There's a neurochemical process that actually rewards you for being submissive and supportive. And so when you kind of tee up this, like, help me out, I'm not really sure if I understand, it's a pure game of manipulation. But we hate the word manipulation. We think there's something dirty about it.
Yeah.
The whole freaking universe lives every minute in a manipulative play. Every minute. Everything we see on TV, everything we hear on the radio, everything we read. Your book is manipulation, and it should be. This conversation is manipulation to get people to be manipulated to let go of some of their beliefs. Everything is manipulation. So if I can manipulate an adversary to feel less threatened and more accepting, and it gives us a chance to have a healthy conversation as opposed to a me against you conversation, I'll take that chance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The risk is finding out that no matter what you do, it doesn't work.
Right.
Okay. And then you're like, well, man, his ideas were stupid. I don't think the ideas are stupid. I just think, go back to the beginning of our conversation, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and it won't cost me a vote. You know, that
and there's 61 million people. Okay, so some of the language, just to reiterate, and I say this for the millionth time, lead with questions. And some of the questions that we worked on together that are on page 213 of the book are as follows. I'm sure I'm missing something about this. Can you take some time to explain your view so I can see what you are seeing?
Yeah.
Another one is, these are like turnkey scripts here. I have a problem. Oh, these are like short little ones. I have a problem, or I need your help.
Yep.
This is the one that I think people are uncomfortable with. It's my fault for not getting this. Because when you're like, you know, 4 to 6 Black women die during pregnancy-related deaths 4 to 6 times more than white women, it's hard to be like, it's my fault for not getting that statistic.
Yeah, and again, we have to look at, are we worried about the statistics or are we worried about having the conversation? It's manipulation. There's no way. And look, that might not be the right approach for that particular conversation.
Right.
It's a menu. It's a Chinese menu. Take your pick.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yep.
It says, you're lifting response. So when you ask these inquiring questions, you're lifting responsibility for any lack of clarity off their shoulders, a place they don't want it to sit anyway. This shouldn't be done as a disingenuous trick. It's a way to set aside any defensiveness and focus on the task at hand. Another option. I don't quite understand. Can you give me some more details? Now, this was one that I used in some workshops with some large huge, understatement, huge NRA enthusiasts,
Yes.
which were like Second Amendment, slippery slope, guns, people, not guns, you know, the NRA script. And I just kept saying, can you give me some more details? Can you give me some more details? And folks, like, they hung in there with me for like a while, right? Like the NRA has done a great job of being like point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but like they don't have point N, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T. And by the time you get down there, they're like, well, I guess you're right. First grade classroom should get shut up by AR-15s. You know, like at some point the details run out.
Yeah, and that's like this isn't a look, there's the MMA, which is 3 rounds of fighting, or 4 rounds, I think, right? And then there's the boxing, and that's 12 rounds. It used to be 15 rounds. If you're going to get into this and you're really passionate about having an impact in a conversation with a relationship that it matters to you, how they see the world, you've got to understand this isn't a one punch.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not that way. There's no arguments are settled with one punch. None.
That's right.
You know,
I mean, like, find me that. Truly, find me that. That would make everyone's life so much easier. I've never had a one-punch successful argument. Not even with my husband or my 5-year-old kid who's going to storm us any minute.
Yeah, and if you're going to go deal with people that are passionate about it, it's like in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where
you're dating yourself. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, never mind.
Charlie.
But anyway, he's about to get in a knife fight with this guy, this big monster of a guy that in one swing of his fist could knock Sundance out, or could knock Butch Cassidy out. And so he's got the adversary has this big knife and he's going to cut him to shreds. And Butch Cassidy just pulls out his gun and shoots him. And he says, never go to a gunfight with a knife, or whatever it is. If you're going to be in this argument, you better have better tools than I don't care. Well, that's stupid. That's going to a gunfight with a knife. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You got to be tactically equal to the task.
Okay. Here's the next Charlie move.
Oh.
And I love it. I haven't used it that much because I've only used it in a professional setting, and I'll tell you all, I don't care, but I've only used this move when I was working as the co-CEO of Organize, and we were trying to bring Oregon procurement organizations together, and for all I know, they might be listening. But like when we first tried to do it, I started off this conversation with something like this. I'm afraid that my answer will upset you.
Yeah.
What should I do? I use this one a lot. I'll finish the sentence. I use this one a lot. It gives people the heads up that they won't be pleased with my response, which never ends up being as bad as they think. Remember, a heads up about discomfort or awkwardness keeps tension contained. So this idea of giving people the heads up that they're going to be disappointed in how this conversation might ultimately end. Yeah. So talk about that. That's like a real, like, everyone's sitting down and we're going to get into it.
Yeah. So there's this unique, well, I don't know if it's unique, but I don't think my dogs and cats get it. Human beings have this enormous capacity to put up with pain or discomfort if they know it's coming.
Right.
We hate it when we don't expect it. And so when you say to someone, I'm afraid this conversation is going to get really uncomfortable and we might end up shouting at each other. So you kind of go to the worst of it. People are like, oh, well, no, go ahead. And so by their acceptance of the risk, it neutralizes that, like, I can't believe you said that to me stuff that creates hardcore reaction that's very emotionally charged. So, look, I'm afraid you're really going to be upset when I have to tell you what I tell you. And people are like, oh, no, that's not that upsetting. So you seem much more reasonable, and they rescue and say, no, you're really being kind of reasonable, Jenna. And so now they hear their own voice say, she's all right. I want to work with her.
Right. The whole
And
point is for them to hear themselves come to
yes,
these. Can you give the example of the American Dental Association? I think it was.
I'm glad you remember that story. So you said I dated myself. I'll date myself again with this one. When I was in my like 9 to 15 years old, I spent a lot of time at the dentist for one reason or another, ending up with braces like so many of us. But the dentist, back then, they had this drill that had this big cable on it, and it sounded like something out of a Star Wars movie that he was jamming into your mouth to extricate a bad filling or a cavity. And it was horrible. And they would just, it was like the Little Shop of Horrors. You just sat in the chair and this event happened to you. And the general reaction of my generation going to the dentist was, man, there's nothing worse than that. I hate the dentist. And I am still affected by that. And so the general perception of that profession, medical professionals, was, we hate you, you're miserable, all you do is hurt us, despite all the good that dentists could do for you. So they finally said, what the hell's going on here? And they did a little study and they found out that if we tell everybody what's happening, they're ready for it. They're not like, oh, you're hurting me. They're like, no, that's not too bad. So when you go to the dentist now, they basically say, okay, Jenna, here's what we're going to do. I've got a drill. We need to take care of this. So here's how the process is going to go. I'm going to get you some Novocaine, but first I'm going to put a little topical anesthetic on there. It might taste like bananas. And when I give you the shot, you're going to feel a little pinch. And you're like, oh, okay, a little pinch. I'm ready for that. And then we're going to let you sit here for 5 or 10 minutes, let the numbness set in. And then I'm going to come in, and that process will probably take about 10 minutes of work.
Right.
Well, and all along they're saying, how are you? Is everything okay? Might be a little sensitive. We're half done. We're 3/4 done. Another 5 minutes. And as long as you know what is about to happen, you're like, all right, I don't have to sit here for who knows how long. I only have a couple minutes left. I can endure it.
Yeah.
When you're surprised, it's like, what the hell did you do that to me for? Why didn't you tell me you were going to punch me in the nose?
Right. So when you go into these conversations, and again, like, I'm procrastinating a little bit on having conversations with those closest to me, and that would make me a hypocrite because I am encouraging folks to do it, but I swear I'm going to do it. But this idea of like, I'm not sure you're going to love what I have to say, or this might be a tense conversation, or this might be an angsty conversation. One of the other things that I love, Charlie, that I don't know if I included in the book, but it is one that I've used oftentimes in the professional space, is I'm okay, and I'll use this in the context of business, I'm okay if this deal doesn't work out.
Yeah.
The idea of like, I'll take them to no instantly, and then you can first see if like they don't want to back, like it almost like throws their card of the hypothetical not going to pan out for them at the top of the conversation, so they can't ever pretend it. And so if you say, I'm okay if we can't work together, I'm okay if we don't get to consensus in this conversation, or I'm okay if we don't agree about abortion on the other side of this conversation. As soon as you do that, you've already bookended the worst case scenario.
Yep.
And then all you're doing is working back toward common ground.
So what it does is it eliminates them from feeling like there's no option but to agree with you. And if you start an interaction saying, well, there's no option. This is why people don't like salespeople, okay? Because someone comes in and starts blowing you up with features and benefits, essentially saying, if you knew all this stuff before I got here, you would have bought it already. So now I'm here to correct your
thinking.
Your thinking. Now
Silly, you didn't see this before me? Yep.
Yeah. And so that's why traditional feature and benefit selling, it works. It's just like Chinese water torture, though. Oh, you don't believe me yet? Let me get some more stuff that you have to believe, and I'll just keep piling it on until you change your mind. So when people won't let a salesperson in, you go to all these offices and they all have that little sign at the front door. no soliciting, right? Why? Well, there's two reasons. One is they don't want salespeople who come in until they get thrown out. That's too much anger to put up with in the workplace. And the other reason is those people are serial shoppers and they're afraid their credit cards are going to blow up. So that's why it says no soliciting there, because they buy everything. But when you tell me I don't have permission to disagree, why do I want to spend that time with you anyway?
Yeah,
It's
that's
absurd.
right.
It's
It's like a waste of my time.
Yeah. And look, for all the agreement and disagreement that we may have about all these issues, we still live in a place where the basic premise is you're free to believe what you want to believe.
Right. And we want to hold that. We want to protect that. We're protecting that.
So why don't we at least allow the conversation to take place and say, you can believe, I can believe. Maybe I can be persuaded, but we seem to have put everybody in corners with big paintbrushes and said, you're not allowed out of that corner. And that's a shame, because it's put us where we are, and it's ugly.
Okay. Well, in the last minutes, I will personally close and then give you the floor too. But my last note in the book is you're not there to change someone else's opinion. And I think as we exist in our polars, and I'm not sure how big the swing section is, but as we're positioning ourselves in our polars, both right and left, it is crucial for us to find space for the possibility of like the middle ground. And like, I'm interested in moving to the middle ground. I won't sacrifice my values for that. And I'm not asking anybody else to either. But I think there's this idea of like, we can't be in a binary state as we try to move forward, which is like, I got to get Charlie to agree with me. I got to get them to vote for not Trump, or like this idea of like, there's not going to be a win or a lose in these conversations. And if we approach not just the next 47 days or that, but the next like 5 years of identity-based work that we have to do in this country, like we're not gonna move. Because the truth is like, I've found that if I invite people in and they are able to then come to their own conclusions in their own voice without me saying anything. And I think that might be a hypothesis of yours.
Yeah, look, one of the things that we've all got to understand, there's only two things in this world that we can control. Two, and that's it. And I don't care, you can be the parent of a 4-year-old kid. Try as you may, you can't control a 4-year-old kid. You might get 20 minutes of compliance or maybe 20 hours of compliance. But that 4-year-old kid's going to do what the 4-year-old kid wants to do. You can control two things. You can control what you do. That's it. I cannot make you do anything. Now, you can agree to do it because you understand what the ramifications of not doing it would be, but it's still your choice to decide if you will do that, if you will choose to take that action. The other thing that you can control, and which you must take full responsibility for, and this is really where the problem lies. People break this rule. They do not take ownership of their emotions. They let their emotions be taken over by other people. And it's what separates us from most of the rest of the animal kingdom. We have emotions that compel us to do things. No one should ever be allowed to co-opt your emotions with their desires. Can I make Jenna Arnold angry? No, I cannot. Now, you may allow yourself to get angry based on something that I've said. But, you know, we see people who say, those people, all those Democrats or all those Republicans, they make me so angry. No, they don't. You hear the information and for some reason decide that being angry about it's worthwhile. Mm-hmm. Nothing is further from the truth. When we own our own emotions, and that means when you're going to have a critical conversation, you got to own your emotions. If you decide to let the other person who may vehemently disagree with you to make you angry, upset, furious, irate, pick the list, you've given away control of one of the most important things you'll ever have to occupy, that self, to someone else. Never do it. Own it and be responsible for it. And the conversations that you're talking about, and you've shared some of these that you've had with the family, we can't give in. We cannot give in emotionally. And you're right. We all have the option to choose what we want to believe and what promise we want to buy. Mm-hmm. Logical or illogical. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the real challenge about all of this. We give up control of our emotions to someone else's beliefs. And that's fundamentally the problem that we're all dealing with.
We all get to choose which promise we want to buy.
Yeah. Look, I can remember being in your office. When were we up in your office in the Starrett building?
In January of last year.
January of last year, I think.
God speaks.
Yeah, and I said something about arguing with people on Facebook, and you kind of laughed at me and said, "What are you, a nut?" And that's not arguable, but you know, I quit interacting with people on Facebook about emotional issues. I just won't do it because there's no real give and take. There's no real context. There's no real connection to the person. And it seems like everybody's looking for the one punch knockout.
Yeah.
My emotions are too special to me. They don't have to be special to anybody else to give up any one iota of control to some or an electronic media wants me to suck into. I'm not going there.
Charlie just said that I'm right all the time, and I know exactly what I'm saying all the time, and you should just do what I say.
I can't argue with Charlie. He's usually right. But I think Charlie would also tell me I'm right all the time. Because as a communications expert, there's probably a way to reconcile those two realities.
Yeah, and then I'm going to be at dinner at your parents' house next Tuesday.
Well, then I'll see you next Tuesday. Okay.
Right, who's on Instagram right now?
Mine.
Wow. Charlie lost that battle.
Yeah.
Charlie, I miss you.
Okay,
Good to see you, Jeremy.
Charlie, we probably really are going to get shut down any second because we can only record for 58 minutes. So anyway, Charlie, thank you for these turnkey suggestions and thoughts. We will take them with strength and empathy and humility as we enter the last sprint for that homework assignment that we have on the 3rd and then well beyond. And thank you so much for being so generous with all of us.
Yeah, look, and if anybody wants to call me up and tell me how stupid I am or send me an email, it's charlie@growthdynamicsonline.com. I'd love
Growth Dynamics. I will make sure that I tag it so that everyone can find you. Bye, Charlie. Thank you.
Love you all. Bye.